Hello, my friendos. Oh, we got the echo coming back on that. Okay, I think we fixed that. Just takes me a little while to figure out what the hell I'm doing out here. Hello, my friendos. We are having a pop-up stream tonight. A little bedtime for Salty. And gonna read us The Void Man. The O is a 0. Hello, Chimera Gamer. What's going on, Matt? If you're not following Chimera Gamer, you're doing it wrong. There we go there. I'd say follow Ben, but that would get you nowhere. So, what is going on, my friendos? How is everybody? Let me switch over to some lo-fi here. Some different lo-fi. Don't follow Ben. He's lost. I'm glad you did say hi, dude. Lord of the Rings, tabletop RPG. Who you playing with, Matt? Yourself? Oh, some coworkers. That's awesome, dude. I didn't know you had any coworkers that were gamers. That is dapper, my friend. Tomorrow night, we're going to be back at 8 o'clock. He says so confidently. 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time to Well, we're actually going to be... Oh, no kidding. 75% of the kitchen is D&D nerds. Nice. We're going to be here at 8 o'clock tomorrow. We're going to be doing some building. Well, one, we're going to be celebrating our making affiliate. I made affiliate in 5 days, which is pretty good, I think. If you look down below at the channel points, I have some channel point redemption set up. We've got a challenge going on for Drunken Tales. We're going to try to raise some points there. But we've got hydrates and posture checks and timing out people and timing out someone else. I don't know. I just added some shit in there. We'll see how it goes. I'm not sure if the points are that right or not. We'll see. We have some hard cider. The King in Yellow is not H.P. Lovecraft. Unless he wrote also The King in Yellow. But King in Yellow was Robert Chambers. I will not be reading The King in Yellow tonight. I'll be reading from The King in Yellow. I'll be reading The Yellow Sign. And there's more here, so we can definitely read more of these down the road. But I have listened to The Yellow Sign just recently. It's a nice little calm and soft bedtime story that's creepy as shit. So we'll go with creepy as shit tonight and read that. I've got some new suspense background music for us, so we'll do that. But yeah, check out if you go down below, check out my Instagram. There is a product launch coming out this Friday that I have been partnered with a company called Pingree Detroit. We're doing leather toiletry bags. So if there's someone in your life that needs something really cool like that, we're doing all upcycled automotive leather. The handle is a seat belt. You can check out that launch. That's coming out this Friday. Those will be going out for $74.99, I believe, on their website. I designed them and made them. And that's going out. I've got some custom sheaths being made this week. I've got to meet... I've got to meet Wednesday with our publisher to hopefully lock in a new contract for next year and start writing the book on Aristotle. I don't know if we're going to do Aristotle or Descartes, but we will see. We'll see where that goes. But again, tomorrow night, 8 o'clock EST, we're celebrating the making affiliate, but we're also doing a lot of D&D stuff. We've got a lot of things to build that we're going to be drawing from. We're going to go back to Legend of Sleepy Hollow and build Ichabod Crane as an NPC. The Lady in White, I think we'll invent her out of whole cloth, what she's just mentioned as another theme. Build that up out of nowhere if we decide to. And then the Headless Horseman. We've got, from Rip Van Winkle, we've got Rip Van Winkle as an NPC, and then the Fae that he hung out with, encountered, we're going to build them as monsters. And then hopefully from tonight, from the yellow sign, I want to build a magic item that is the yellow sign, and then a monster that is the person who watches the church. So we'll do that. I'm also going to start setting these up to go to YouTube so that you guys will have these to watch anytime you want. So I'll probably figure that out this week. I'm going to start sending that stuff to YouTube. So without further ado, we're going to be reading up from the book The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers, first published in 1895. So it's not in copyright. You don't have to worry about that. You can read it to whomever you want to. The King in Yellow is dedicated to my brother. Along the shore the cloud waves break. The twin suns sink behind the lake. The shadows lengthen. The shadows lengthen in Carcosa. Strange is the night where black stars rise. And strange moons circle through the skies. But stranger still is lost Carcosa. Songs that Hades shall sing, where flaps and tatters of the king most die unheard in dim Carcosa. Song of my soul, my voice is dead. Die thou, unsung as tears unshed, shall die and dry in lost Carcosa. Casilda's Song, The King in Yellow, Act 1, Scene 2. I wonder who wrote that play. We'd have to look that up. So we'll be reading from the Yellow Sign tonight. And we'll see how that goes. So cheers to all of you out here. Thank you for coming down and supporting this stream. Make sure that you're following. And you have the notifications on for when I go live and decide to read to Salty. Salty, if you're out there and watching, I hope you're in bed and didn't fall asleep too soon, but if you did, I hope you sleep well. We'll figure out someone to raid here in a little bit after we read. But before then, the Yellow Sign. Yay, reading, says V. Let's go over to some suspense themes. All right. The Yellow Sign. Let the red dawn surmise what we shall do when this blue starlight dies and all is through. There are so many things which are impossible to explain. Why should certain chords of music make me think of the brown and gold tints of autumn foliage? Why should the mass of Saint Cecile bend my thoughts wandering among the caverns whose walls blaze with ragged masses of virgin silver? What was it in the roar and turmoil of Broadway at 6 o'clock that flashed before my eyes, the picture of a still Breton forest where the sunlight filtered through the spring foliage, and Sylvia bent, half curiously, half tenderly, over a small green lizard, murmuring, "To think that this also is a little ward of God." Hi, Salty. I love you, baby. When I first saw the watchman, his back was towards me. I looked at him indifferently until he went into the church. I paid no more attention to him than I had any other man who lounged through Washington Square that morning. And when I shut my window and turned back into my studio, I had forgotten him. Late in the afternoon, the day being warm, I raised the window again and leaned out to get a sniff of air. A man was standing in the courtyard of the church, and I noticed him again with little interest as I had that morning. I looked across the square to where the fountain was playing, And then, with my mind filled with the vague impressions of trees, asphalt drives, and the moving groups of nursemaids and holiday makers, I started to walk back to my easel. As I turned, my listless gaze included the man below in the courtyard. His face was towards me now, and with a perfectly involuntary movement, I bent to see it. At the same moment, he raised his head and looked at me. Instantly, I thought of coffin worm. Whatever it was about this man repelled me, I did not know, but that the impression of his plump white grave worm was so intense and nauseating that I must have shown it on my expression, for he turned his puffy face away with a movement that made me think of a disturbed grub in a chestnut. I went back to my easel and motioned the model to resume her pose. After working a while, I was satisfied that I was spoiling what I had done as rapidly as possible, and I took up the palette knife and scraped the color out again. The flesh tones were sallow and unhealthy, and I did not understand how I could have painted such a sickly color into the study, which before had glowed with healthy tones. I looked at Tessie. She had not changed. The clear flush of health dyed her neck and her cheeks as I frowned. "Is it something I've done?" she said. "No. I've made a mess of this arm, and for the life of me I can't see how I came to paint such mud into the canvas," I replied. "Don't I pose well?" she insisted. "Of course, perfectly." "Then it's not my fault?" "No, it's my own." "I'm very sorry," she said. I told her she could rest while I applied rag and turpentine to the plague spot on my canvas, and she went off to smoke a cigarette and look over the illustrations of the Curia Francaise. I did not know whether it was something in the turpentine or a defect in the canvas, but the more I scrubbed, the more gangrene seemed to spread. I worked like a beaver to get it out, and yet the disease appeared to creep from limb to limb of the study before me. Alarmed, I strove to arrest it, but now the color of the breast changed, and the whole figure seemed to absorb the infection as a sponge soaks up water. Vigorously, I applied palette knife, turpentine, and scraper, thinking all the time what a seance I should hold with Duval, who sold me the canvas. But soon I noticed that I was not the canvas, which was defective, nor the colors of Edward. It must be the turpentine, I thought angrily, or my eyes have become so blurred and confused by the afternoon light that I can't see straight. I called Tessie, the model. She came over and leaned over my chair, blowing rings of smoke in the air. "What have you done to it?" she exclaimed. "Nothing," I growled. "It must be this turpentine." "What a horrible color it is now," she continued. "Do you think my flesh resembles green cheese?" "No, I don't," I said angrily. "Did you ever know me to paint like that before?" "No, indeed." "Well, then, it must be the turpentine or something," she admitted. She slipped on a Japanese robe and walked to the window, and scraped and rubbed until I was tired. Finally picked up my brushes and hurled them through the canvas with forcible expression, the tone alone of which reached Tessie's ears. Nevertheless, she promptly began. "That's it. Swear and act silly and ruin your brushes. What have you been, 3 weeks on that study? And now look. What's the good of ripping the canvas? What creatures artists are." I felt about as much ashamed as I usually did after such an outbreak, and after I turned the ruined canvas to the wall, Tessie helped me clean my brushes and then danced away to dress. From the screen, she regaled me with bits of advice concerning the whole or a partial loss of temper, until thinking perhaps I had been tormented sufficiently, she came out to implore me to button her waist where she could not reach it on the shoulder. "Everything went wrong from the time you came back from the window. You talked about that horrid-looking man you saw in the churchyard," she announced. "Yes, he's probably bewitched the picture," I said, yawning. I looked at my watch. "It's after 6, I know," said Tessie, adjusting her hat before the mirror. "Yes," I replied. "I didn't mean to keep you so long." I leaned out of the window, but recoiled with disgust, for the young man with the pasty face stood below in the churchyard. Tessie saw my gesture of disapproval and leaned to the window. "Is that the man you don't like?" she whispered. I nodded. "I can't see his face, but he does look fat and soft, some way or another," she continued, looking at me. "He reminds me of a dream, an awful dream I had once. Or," she mused, looking down at her shapely shoes, "was it a dream after all?" "How should I know?" I smiled. Tessie smiled in reply. "You were in it," she said, "so perhaps you might know something about it." Tessie, I protested. Don't dare flatter me by saying you had a dream about me. But I did, she insisted. Shall I tell you about it? Go ahead, I replied, lighting a cigarette. Tessie leaned back on the open windowsill and began very seriously. One night last winter, I was lying in bed, thinking about nothing at all in particular. I'd been posing for you, and I was tired out, yet it seemed impossible for me to sleep. I heard the bells of the city ring 10, 11, and midnight. I must have fallen asleep about midnight because I don't remember hearing the bells after that. It seemed to me that I had scarcely closed my eyes when dreaming that something impelled me to go to the window. I rose and, raising the sash, leaned out. 25th Street was deserted as far as I could see. I began to be afraid. Everything outside seemed so black and uncomfortable. Then the sound of wheels in the distance came to my ears, and it seemed to me as though that was what I must wait for. Very slowly the wheels approached, and finally I could make out a vehicle moving along the street. It came nearer and nearer, and when it passed beneath the window, I saw that it was a hearse. Then, as I trembled with fear, the driver opened and looked straight at me. When I awoke, I was standing by the open window, shivering with cold, and the black-plumed hearse and the driver were gone. I dreamed this dream again last March, and woke beside the open window. Last night the dream came again, and how I remember it was raining. When I awoke standing at the open window, my nightdress was soaked. But where did I come from in the dream? You were in the coffin, but you were not dead. In the coffin? Yes. How did you know? Could you see me? No, I only knew you were there. Had you been eating Welsh rare bits or lobster salad? I began laughing, but the girl interrupted me with a frightened cry. Hello, what's up? I said, and she shrank into the embrasure by the window. The man below in the courtyard. He drove the hearse. Nonsense, I said, but Tessie's eyes were wide with terror. I went to the window to look out. The man was gone. Come, Tessie, I urged. Don't be foolish. You've posed too long. You're nervous. Do you think I could ever forget that face? She murmured. 3 times I saw the hearse pass below my window, and every time the driver turned and looked up at me. His face was so white and soft. It looked dead, as if it had been dead a long time. I induced the girl to sit down and swallow a glass of marsala. Then I sat down beside her and tried to give her some advice. Look here, Tessie. You go to the country for a week or 2, and you'll have no more dreams about hearses. You pose all day, and when night comes, your nerves are upset. You can't keep this up. Then again, instead of going to bed when your work's done, you rush off to picnic at Sulzer's Park or go to El Dorado or Coney Island. And when you come down here the next morning, you're fagged out. There's no real hearse. There was a soft-shelled crab dream. She smiled faintly. What about the man in the courtyard? Oh, he's only an ordinarily unhealthy everyday creature. As true as my name is Tessie Reardon. I swear to you, Mr. Scott, that the face of the man below in the courtyard is a face of a man who drove the hearse. What of it? It's an honest trade. Then you think I did see the hearse? Oh, I said diplomatically, if you did, it might not be unlikely that the man below drove it. There's nothing in that. Tessie rose, unrolled her scented handkerchief, taken out a piece of gum from a knot in the hem, placed it in her mouth. Then, drawing on her gloves, she offered me her hand with a frank, "Good night, Mr. Scott," and walked out. The next morning, Thomas, the bellboy, brought me the Herald and a bit of news. The church next door has been sold. I thanked heaven for it. Not that being a Catholic I had any repugnance for the congregation next door, but because my nerves were shattered by the blatant extorter, whose every word echoed through the aisle of the church as if it had been in my own room, and who insisted his R's with a nasal persistence which revolted my every instinct. Then, too, there was the fiend in human shape, an organist who reeled off some grand old hymns with the interpretation of his own, and I longed for the blood of a creature who could play the doxology with an amendment of minor chords which only hears in a quartet of very young undergraduates. I believe the minister was a good man, But when he bellowed, "And the Lord said to Moses, the Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. My wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill you with the sword." I wondered how many creatures of purgatory it would take to atone for such a sin. "Who brought the property?" I asked Thomas. "Nobody that I knows, sir. They do say the gent what owns this here Hamilton Flats is looking at it. He might be building to more studios." I walked to the window. The young man with the unhealthy face stood by the churchyard gate, and the mere sight of him gave some overwhelming repugnance that took possession of me. "By the way, Thomas, who's that fellow down there?" Thomas sniffed. "That there worm, sir? He's night watchman of the church. He makes me tired of sitting out all night on them steps looking at you insulting like. I'd have punched his head, sir. Beg pardon, sir." "Go on, Thomas." "One night of coming home with Harry, the other English boy, I sees him sitting there on the steps. We had Molly and Jen with us, sir, and the two girls on the tray service. And he looked so insulting. And then he'd look up at us and then says, 'What you looking at, you fat slug?' Beg your pardon, sir, but that's how I says it, sir. Then he don't say nothing, and I says, 'Come out and I'll punch you in your pudding head.' Like he opens the gate and goes in, but he don't say nothing. He looks insulting like. Then it's, I'm one, but I hits it in the head, and that cold and mushy would sicken you to touch him." "What'd he do then?" I asked, curious. I'm nothing. And you, Thomas?" "Oh, him? Nothing. And what are you, Thomas?" The young fellow flushed with embarrassment and smiled uneasily. "Mr. Scott, sir, I ain't no coward, sir, and I can't make it out why I run. But I was in the 5th Lancers, sir, bugler at Tel Kabir, and was shot in the wells." "You don't mean to say you ran away?" "Yes, sir, I run." "Why?" "That's just what I wanted to know, sir. I grabbed Molly and run, and the rest was as frightened as I." "But what were they frightened at?" Thomas refused to answer for a while. Now my curiosity was aroused about the repulsive young man below, and I pressed him. 3 years sojourn in America, and not one only modified Thomas' Cockney dialect, but had given him America's fear of ridicule. "You won't believe him, Mr. Scott, sir." "Yes, I will." "You'll laugh at me, sir." "Nonsense." He hesitated. "Well, sir, it's the God's truth. When I hit him, he grabbed me wrist, sir, and when I twisted his soft, mushy fist, one of his fingers come off in me hand." The utter loathing and horror of Thomas' face must have been reflected in my own, for he added, "It's awful, and now when I seen I'm going away, he makes me ill." When Thomas had gone, and when I went to the window, the man stood beside the church railings with both hands on the gate. I hastily retreated to my easel again, sickened and horrified, for I saw that the middle finger of his right hand was missing. I think I did a new... Yeah. I'm butchering things tonight. Sorry about the dialect. At 9 o'clock, Tessie appeared and vanished behind the screen with her merry, "Good morning, Mr. Scott." When she reappeared, she had taken her pose upon the model stand. I started a new canvas, much to her delight. She remained silent as long as I was on my drawing, but as soon as the scrape of charcoal ceased, I took up my fixative and she began to chatter. "Oh, what a lovely time we had last night. We went to Tony Pastor's." "Who are we?" I demanded. "Oh, Maggie, you know, Mr. White's model, and Pinky McCormick." "Thank you, Belle Suze, for the 300 to the Drunken Tales challenge. We're going to make that faster than I hope. We'll see. We'll see how it goes." "Oh, Maggie, you know, Mr. White's model, and Pinky McCormick. We call her Pinky because she's got beautiful red hair you artists like so much, and Lizzie Burke." I sent a shower of spray from the fixative over the canvas. "Well, go on." "We saw Kelly and Baby Barnes, the skirt dancer, and all the rest. I made a mash." "Then you have gone back on me, Tessie?" "It's awful." "Oops. You've gone back on me, Tessie?" She laughed and shook her head. He's Lizzie Burke's brother, Ed. He's a perfect gentleman. I felt constrained to give her some parental advice concerning mashing when she took it with a bright smile. Oh, I can take care of a strange mash, she said, examining her chewing gum. But Ed's different. Lizzie's my best friend. Then she related how Ed had come back from the stocking mill in Lowell, Massachusetts to find her and Lizzie all grown up, and what an accomplished young man he was, and how he thought nothing of squandering $50 for ice cream and oysters to celebrate his entry as clerk into the woolen department of Macy's. I'm not so sure I want a combination of oysters and ice cream, or oyster ice cream. That sounds gross. But what do I know? Before she finished, I began to paint, and she resumed the pose, smiling and chattering like a sparrow. By noon, I had the study fairly well rubbed in, and Tessie came to look at it. That's better, she said. I thought so too, and ate my lunch with a satisfied feeling that all was going well. Tessie spread her lunch on a drawing table opposite me, and we drank our claret from the same bottle and lighted our cigarettes from the same match. I was very much attached to Tessie. I had watched her shoot up into a slender but exquisitely formed woman from a frail, awkward child. She had posed for me during the last 3 years. And among all my models, she was my favorite. I'm going to turn down my mix here a little bit. There we go. It would have troubled me very much indeed that she had become tough, or fly, as the phrase goes. But I never noticed any deterioration of her manner, and felt at heart that she was doing all right. She and I never discussed morals at all, and I had no intention of doing so, partly because I had none myself, and partly because I knew she would do what she liked in spite of me. Still, I did hope that she would steer clear of complications, because I wished her well, and then I had a selfish desire to retain the best models I had. I knew that mashing, as she termed it, had no significance with girls like Tessie, and that such girls in America did not resemble in the least the same things in Paris. Yet having lived with my eyes open, I also knew that somebody would take Tessie away someday in one manner or another. And though I professed to myself that marriage was nonsense, I sincerely hoped that, in this case, there would be a priest at the end of the vista. I'm a Catholic. When I listen to High Mass and when I sign myself, I feel that everything, including myself, is more cheerful. And when I confess, it does me good. A man who lives as much alone as I do must confess to somebody. Then again, Sylvia was Catholic, and it was reason enough for me. But I was speaking of Tessie, which is very different. Tessie was also Catholic, but much more devout than I so. Taking it all in all, I had very little fear for my pretty model until she should fall in love. But then I knew that fate would decide her future for her, and I prayed inwardly that fate would keep her away from men like me and throw her into the path of nothing but Ed Burke's and Jimmy McCormick's, bless her sweet face. Tessie sat blowing rings of smoke up to the ceiling, tinkling the ice in her tumbler. Do you know I had that dream last night? Not about that man, she laughed. Exactly. A dream similar to yours, only much worse. It was foolish and thoughtless of me to say this, but you know how little tact the average painter has. I must have fallen asleep about 10 o'clock, I continued, and after a while I dreamt that I awoke. So plainly did I hear the midnight bells, the wind of the tree branches, and the whistle of the steamers from the bay, that even now I can scarcely believe I was not awake. I seemed to be lying in a box which had glass over it. Dimly I watched the street lamps as I passed, for I must tell you, Tessie, the box which I reclined appeared to lie in a cushioned wagon which jolted me over stony pavement. After a while I became impatient and tried to move, but the box was too narrow. My hands were crossed on my breast, so I could not raise them to myself. I listened and then tried to call. My voice was gone. I could hear the trample of horses attached to the wagon and even the breathing of the driver. Then another sound broke upon my ears like the raising of a window sash. I managed to turn my head a little and found I could look not only through the glass of the cover of my box, but also through the glass panels on the side of the covered vehicle. I saw houses, empty and silent, with neither light nor life about them, excepting one, In that house, a window was open on the first floor, and a figure in all white stood looking down the street. It was you. Tessia turned face away from me and leaned on the table with her elbow. I could see your face, I resumed, and it seemed to me to be very sorrowful. Hey, Asikia, thanks for the sub.
Asikia Lord just subscribed.
Excellent. I really, really appreciate your subbing. Thanks, JJ, for banning me. Appreciate it. I think you need the full ban. Ban JJ. Yeah, like that. Ban JJ. There's a Bandio. There you go. Perfect. Hey, Siki, how are you? Hey, JJ. How are you doing, brother? I could see your face, I resumed. And it seemed to be very sorrowful. So for those of you who are just joining us, let me give you the little bit of a recap. There's a painter painting a subject. He looks out the window. Oh, Gemini's still sick. That sucks. He looks out the window and sees this gross old man out there. Talks to the dude out front. And the dude out front thinks he's disgusting and got in a little scrap with him, and his finger came off. The grubby dude out in front of the church. And they've been having dreams about him. So that's where we're at. And it seemed to be very sorrowful. Then we passed on. He's talking about a dream right now. Then we passed on and turned into a narrow black lane. Presently the horses stopped. And I waited and waited, closing my eyes with fear and impatience, but all was silent as the grave. After what seemed to me hours, I began to feel uncomfortable. A sense that somebody was close to me made me unclose my eyes. Then I saw the white face of the hearse driver looking at me through the lid coffin. A sob from Tessie interrupted me. She was trembling like a leaf, and I saw I'd made an ass of myself, and I attempted to repair the damage. Why, Tess, I only told you this to show you what influence your story might have had on another person's dreams. You don't suppose I really laid in that coffin, do you? What are you trembling for? Don't you see that your dream and my unreasonable dislike for that inoffensive watchman of the church simply set my brain working as soon as I fell asleep? She laid her head between her arms and sobbed as if her heart would break. What a precious triple donkey I had made of myself. But I was about to break my record. I went over and put my arm around her. Tessie, dear, forgive me. I had no business to frighten you with such nonsense. You're too sensible a girl, too good a Catholic to believe in dreams. Her hand tightened on me and her head fell upon my shoulder, but still trembled, and I petted her and comforted her. Come, Tess, open your eyes and smile. Her eyes opened with a slow, languid movement and met mine, but their expression was so queer that I hastened to reassure her again. It's all humbug, Tessie. You surely are not afraid of any harm that will come to you because of that. No. Holy shit, Asikia.
Cookies just subscribed.
A 5-bomb. Holy crap. We're going to wait for these now, I think. Yeah. Captain Mizzy.
Captain Mizzy just subscribed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Asikia, for the 5-bomb. That is awesome. And another one. Cookie.
Cookie Mondius just subscribed.
You know how that cookie go. And then Dat Boy Nate.
Dat Boy Nate 795 just subscribed.
And Belsuze.
Belsuze just subscribed.
Thank you so much, Asikia. So very much. I don't even think I have a hype thing. No, I gotta have to work that up down the road. Thank you so much, Asikia. It means the world to me. I really, really appreciate it. Any money I get on this, I do not need the money from this stream. Any money I get out of this, I'll be putting back into the stream to get myself a desktop to just do more cool things for the stream. Promise, it's all going straight back in. It's all humbug, Tessie. You surely are not afraid that any harm will come to you because of that. No, she said, but her scarlet lips quivered. Then what's the matter? Are you afraid? Yes. Not for myself. For me, then? I demanded gaily. For you, she murmured in a voice almost inaudible. I care for you. At first I started to laugh, but when I understood her, a shock passed through me like I sat like one turned to stone. This was the crowning bit of idiocy I had committed. Thanks, Asiki. I really appreciate it, buddy. Check it out. You're first there. You got your founder badge and you got gift leader. Woo-hoo! Check that out. And now your gift leader down here, gifted 5 times. Everything is good. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I thought of 1,000 responses to that innocent confession. I could pass it by with a laugh. I could misunderstand her and assure her as to my health. I could simply point out that it was impossible that she could love me. But my reply was quicker than my thoughts, and I might think and think now when it was too late, for I had kissed her on the mouth. That evening I took my usual walk in Washington Park, pondering over the occurrences of the day. I was thoroughly committed. There was no backing out now, and I stared at the future straight in the face. It was not good. Not even scrupulous. But I had no idea of deceiving either myself or Tessie. On the mouth, V. Arathu, I didn't. No one lets me do that. Are you crazy? Are you crazy? This painter kissed Tessie on the mouth. His model. His naked model. No, Salty doesn't let me. She hides. She runs away. I don't blame her. I have kind of bad breath. It was not good. Not even scrupulous. But I had no idea of deceiving myself. Or Tessie. The one passion of my life lay buried in a sunlit forest in Brittany. Was it buried forever? Hope cried no. For 3 years I'd been listening to the voice of hope. In 3 years I had waited for a footstep on my threshold. Had Sylvia forgotten? No, cried Hope. I said that I was no good. That's true, but still I was not exactly a comic opera villain. I'd led an easygoing, reckless life, taking what invited of me my pleasure and deploring and sometimes bitterly regretting the consequences. In one thing alone, accepting my painting, was I serious. That was something which lay hidden, if not lost, in the Breton forests. It was too late for me to regret what occurred that day. Whatever it had been, a pity, sudden tenderness for sorrow, or the more brutal instinct of gratified vanity, it was all the same now. And unless I wished to bruise an innocent heart, my path lay marked before me. The fire and strength and the depth of the passion of my love, which I had never even suspected, with all my imagined experience in the world, left me no alternative to respond or send her away. Whether because I'm so cowardly about the given pain to others, or whether it was that I have little of the gloomy Puritan in me, I do not know, but I shrank from disclaiming responsibility for that thoughtless kiss, and in fact had no time to do before the gates of her heart opened and a flood poured forth. Others who habitually do their duty might find sullen satisfaction in making themselves and everybody else unhappy, might have withstood it. I did not. I dared not. After the storm had abated and I did tell her that she might have better loved Ed Burke or worn a plain gold ring, but she would not hear of it. And I thought perhaps as long as she had decided to love somebody she could not marry, it had better be me. I at least could treat her with intelligent affection, and whenever she became tired of her infatuation, she could go none the worse for it. I was decided on that point, although I knew how hard it would be. I remembered the usual termination of platonic liaisons, and thought how disgusted I had been whenever I heard of one. I knew it was an undertaking a great deal so unscrupulous a man as I was, and I dreamed for the future. But never for one moment did I doubt that she was safe with me. Had it been anybody but Tessie, I should not have bothered my head about scruples, for it did not occur to me to sacrifice Tessie, as I would have sacrificed a woman of the world. I looked at the future squarely in the face, and I saw several probable endings to the affair. she would either tire of the whole thing or become so unhappy that I should have either to marry her or go away. If I married her, we would be unhappy. I with a wife who unsuited to me, and she with a husband unsuitable to any woman. For my past life could scarcely entitle me to marry. If I went away, she might either fall ill, recover, or marry some Eddie Burke. And she might recklessly or deliberately go and do something foolish. On the other hand, if she tired of me, then her whole life would be before her with the beautiful vistas of Eddie Burkes and marriage rings and twins and Harlem Flats and heaven knows what. As I strolled along through the trees by Washington Arch, I decided that she should find a substantial friend in me. Anyway, and the future could take care of itself. Then I went to the house and put on my evening dress, for the little faintly perfumed note on my dresser said, "Have a cab at the stage door at 11." And the note was signed Edith Carmichael, Metropolitan Theater. I took supper that night, or rather we took supper, Miss Carmichael and I, at Solari's, and dawn was just beginning to glide across the Memorial Church as I entered Washington Square after leaving Edith at Brunswick. There was not a soul in the park as I passed among the trees and took the walk which leads from the Garibaldi statue to the Hamilton apartment house. But as I passed the churchyard, I saw a figure sitting on the stone steps. In spite of myself, a chill crept over me at the sight of the white, puffy face, and I hastened to pass. But then he said something which might have been addressed to me or might merely have been a mutter to himself. But a sudden furious anger flamed up with me within such a creature that should address me. For an instant I felt like wheeling about him and smashing my stick over his head. But I walked on, and entering the Hamilton, went to my apartment. For some time I tossed about in the bed trying to get a sound of his voice out of my ears, but I could not. It filled my head, that muttering sound, like thick oily smoke from a fat-rendering vat, or an odor of noisome decay. As I lay and tossed about, the voice in my ears seemed more distinct, and I began to understand the words he had muttered. They came to me slowly, as if I had forgotten them, or at least I could make some sense out of the sounds. It was this. "Have you found the yellow sign? Have you found the yellow sign? Have you found the yellow sign?" I was furious. What did he mean by that? Then with a curse upon him, I rolled over and I went to sleep. But when I awoke, I later looked pale and haggard, for I dreamed the dream of the night before, and it troubled me more than I cared to think. I dressed and went down to my studio. Tessie sat by the back window, but as I came in, she rose and put both arms around my neck for an innocent kiss. She looked so sweet and dainty that I kissed her again, and she sat down before the easel. Rathu, I was drinking cider before, just going to have one tonight, and just water now. That was an Angry Orchard dry cider. "Hello. Where's the study I began yesterday?" I asked. Tessie looked conscious but did not answer. I began hunting amongst the piles of canvases. "Hurry up, Tess, and get ready. We must take advantage of the morning light." When at last I gave up my search amongst the other canvases and turned to look around the room in the missing study, I saw Tessie standing by the screen with her clothes on. "What's the matter?" I asked. "Don't you feel well?" "Yes." "Then hurry. Do you want me to pose as I always have posed?" Then I understood. Here was a new complication. I had lost, of course, the best nude model I'd ever seen. I looked at Tessie. Her face was scarlet. Alas, alas. We had eaten of the tree of knowledge in Eden, and native innocence were dreams of the past. I mean, for her. I suppose she noticed the disappointment on my face, for she said, I will pose if you wish. The study is behind the screen where I put it. "No," I said. "We'll begin something new." And we went to our wardrobe and picked out a Moorish costume, which fairly blazed with tinsel. It was a genuine costume, and Tessie returned to the screen with it enchanted. When she came forth again, I was astonished. Her long black hair was bound above her forehead in a circlet of turquoises at the ends, curled up about her glittering girdle. Her feet were encased in embroidered and pointed slippers, and the skirt of her costume, curiously wrought with arabesques and silver, fell to her ankles. The deep metallic blue vest was embroidered with silver, and the short Moresque jacket, spangled and sewn with turquoises, became her wonderfully. She came up to me and held up her face, smiling. I slipped my hand in my pocket and, drawing out a gold chain with a cross attached, dropped it over her head. "It's yours, Tessie." "Mine?" she faltered. "Yours. Now go and pose." Then with a radiant smile, she ran behind the screen and presently reappeared with a little box on which was written my name. "I intended to give it to you when I went home tonight, but I can't wait now." I opened the box. On pink cotton lay a clasp of black onyx, on which was laid a curious symbol. It was neither Arabic nor Chinese, nor, as I found afterwards, did it belong to any human script. "It's all I had to give you for a keepsake," she said timidly. I was annoyed, but I told her how much I should prize it and promised to wear it always. She fastened it on my coat beneath the lapel. "How foolish, Tess, to go and buy me such a beautiful thing as this," I said. "I did not buy it." "Where did you get it?" She told me how she had found it one day while coming from the aquarium in the Battery, how she advertised it and watched the papers, but gave up all hopes of finding the owner. "That was last winter." The very day I had the first horrid dream about the hearse. I remembered my dream the previous night, but said nothing. And presently my charcoal was flying over a new canvas, and Tess stood motionless on the model stand. Part 3. The day following was a disastrous one for me. While moving a framed canvas from one easel to another, my foot slipped on the polished floor, and I fell heavily on both wrists. They were so badly sprained that it was useless to attempt to hold a brush, and I was obliged to wander about the studio, glaring at the unfinished paintings and sketches until despair seized me, and I sat down to smoke and twiddle my thumbs with rage. The rain blew against the windows and rattled on the roof of the church, driving me into a nervous fit with its interminable patter. Tessie sat sewing by the window, and every now and then raised her head and looked at me with such innocent compassion that I began to feel ashamed for my irritation, and looked about for something to occupy me. I had read all the papers and books in the library, but for the sake of something to do, I went to the bookcases and shoved them open with my elbow. I knew every volume by its color and examined them, passing slowly about the library and whistling to keep up my spirits. I was turning to go to the dining room when my eye fell upon a book bound in serpent skin, standing in the corner of a top shelf of the last bookcase. I did not remember it, and from the floor could not decipher the pale lettering on the back. So I went to the smoking room and called Tessie. She came back to the studio and climbed up to reach the book. "What is it?" I asked. "The King in Yellow." I was dumbfounded. Who had placed it there? How came it into my room? I had long ago decided I should never open that book, and nothing on earth could have persuaded me to buy it. Fearful lest curiosity might tempt me to open it, I had never even looked at it in the bookstores. If I had even had any curiosity to read it, the awful tragedy of the young Castaigne, whom I knew, prevented me from exploring its wicked pages. I had always refused to listen to any description of it, and indeed nobody ever ventured to discuss the second part aloud, so I had absolutely no knowledge of what those leaves might reveal. I stared at the poisonous mottling binding as I would a snake. "Don't touch it, Tessie," I said. "Come down." Of course, my admonition was enough to arouse her curiosity, and before I could prevent it, she took the book and, laughing, danced away into the studio with it. I called to her, but she slipped away with a tormenting smile at my helpless hands, and I followed with some impatience. "Tessie," I cried, entering the library. "Listen, I'm serious. Put that book away. I do not wish you to open it." The library was empty. I went into both drawing rooms, then into the bedrooms, laundry, kitchen, and finally returned to the library and began a systematic search. She had hidden herself so well that it was half an hour later that I discovered her crouching, white and silent, by the latticed window in the storeroom above. At first glance, I saw that she had been punished for her foolishness. The King in Yellow laid at her feet, but the book was open to the second part. I looked at Tessie, and I knew it was too late. She had opened The King in Yellow. Then I took by her hand and led her to the studio. She seemed dazed. When I told her to lie down on the sofa, she obeyed me without a word. After a while, she closed her eyes and breathing became regular and deep, but I could not determine whether or not she slept. For a long while I sat silently beside her, and she neither stirred nor spoke. And last I rose and, entering the unused storeroom, took the book in my least injured hand. It seemed heavy as lead, but I carried it to the studio again, and sitting down on the rug beside the sofa, opened it and read it from beginning to end. When faint with excess of my emotions, I dropped the volume and leaned wearily back against the sofa. Tessie opened her eyes and looked at me. We'd been speaking for some time in a dull, monotonous strain before I realized we were discussing the King in Yellow. Oh, the sin of writing such words. Words which are clear as crystal, limpid and musical as bubbling springs. Words which sparkle and glow like the poisonous diamonds of the Medicis. Oh, the wickedness, the hopeless damnation of a soul who could fascinate and paralyze human creatures with such words. Words understood by the ignorant and wise alike. Words which are more precious than jewels, more soothing than music, more awful than death. We talked on, unmindful of the gathering shadows, and she was begging me to throw away the clasp of black onyx quaintly inlaid with what we now knew to be the yellow sign. I shall never know why I refused, though even at this hour here in my bedroom as I write this confession, I should be glad to know what it was that prevented me from tearing the yellow sign from my breast and casting it into the fire. I'm sure I wished to do so, and yet Tessie pleaded with me in vain. Night fell and hours dragged on, but still we murmured to each other the king in the pallid mask. The midnight sounded like misty spires in a fog-wrapped city. We spoke of Hastur and Casilda, while outside the fog rolled across the blank window panes as the cloud waves rolls and break on the shores of Hali. The house was very silent now. Not a sound came up from the misty streets. Tessie lay amongst the cushions, her face a gray blot in the gloom, but her hands were clasped in mine, and I knew that she had read my thoughts and I read hers, for we understood the mystery of Hades, and the phantom of truth was laid. Then we answered each other swiftly, silently, thought on thought. The shadows stirred in the gloom about us, and far in the streets we heard a sound. Nearer and nearer it came. The dull crunching of wheels, nearer and yet nearer, and now outside before the door it ceased. I dragged myself to the window, and I saw the black-plumed hearse. The gate below opened and shut, and I crept shaking to my door, and I bolted it. But I knew no bolts, no locks could keep that creature out who was coming for the yellow sign. And now I heard him moving softly along the hall. Now he was at the door, and the bolts rotted at his touch. Now he had entered. With eyes starting from my head, I peered into the darkness, but when he came into the room, I could not see him. It was only when I felt him envelop me with his cold, soft grasp that I cried out and struggled with deadly fury. But my hands were useless, and he tore the onyx clasp from my coat, and he struck me full in the face. Then as I fell, I heard Tessie's soft cry, and her spirit fled. And even while falling, I longed to follow her, for I knew the King in Yellow had opened his tattered mantle, and I knew that only God to cry to now. I could tell more. But I could not see what help it would be to the world. As for me, I'm past human help or hope. As I lie here writing, careless even upon whether I die before I finish, I can see the doctor gathering up his powders and vials with a vague gesture to the good priest beside me, which I understand. They'll be very curious to know the tragedy. They of the outside world, who write books and print millions of newspapers. But I shall write no more, and the Father Confessor will seal my last words with the seal of sanctity when his holy office is done. They of the outside world may send their creatures into the wrecked homes and death-smitten firesides, and their newspapers will batten on blood of tears. But with me, their spies must halt before the confessional. They know that Tessie's dead. They know that I am dying. They know how people in the house arose by an infernal scream, rushed into my room, and found one living and two dead. But they do not know how I shall tell them what I shall tell them now. They do not know what the doctor said as he pointed to a horrible decomposed heap on the floor, the livid corpse of the watchman from the church. I have no theory, no explanation. That man must have been dead for months. I think I am dying. I wish the priest would. And that is The Yellow Sign by Robert W. Chambers. A wonderful bedtime story to finish our Monday evening out with. Spooky, I know. It's a good one, though, man. This is one that snuck up on me. Oh, don't worry, Chimera. The VOD is up in just a few minutes. You can listen to it again. Yeah, I liked it too. It's really good. It's really, really good. And I think what I want to do is tomorrow night, again, 8 p.m., I think what I want to do is the dude I want to make up, he has some ability. I want to make a magic item for an inspired Lovecraft, I believe. Okay, that makes sense, Chimera Gamer. That makes sense, Matt. I think what I want to do is make up a magic item for the Yellow Sign, the necklace that Tessie found, and then the magic item for the King in Yellow. I think they should be like companion magic items somehow, and I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but I think it's really cool how it sort of all worked out. So we'll roll through that tomorrow. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? I'm sure it'll be fine. It'll be fine. So, again, I always appreciate you guys coming down. I deeply, deeply appreciate the 5 bomb that was dropped tonight. That was awesome. So we've got quite a few more subs. And we've got biddies coming in. You guys have been very, very generous. Every penny I get, I will put in to the new gaming, or the new laptop that I'm going to be, or desktop that I'm going to be building. I'm running this off of a laptop right now, which is fine. I'm sure it would run for quite some time, but a desktop would be nice. So I will build that as we keep going. You got a sub. You got a sub. Cookie, check that out. Deeply appreciated all you guys. Let me turn back my Spotify down. And let's turn back to some lo-fi. Oopsie. Hey, thanks, Matt.
Chimera Gamer just subscribed.
Deeply appreciate. So I think we got 6 or 7 subs tonight. That's pretty awesome. Again, I really appreciate all you guys coming down. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, we're going to be doing some D&D building, but I'll probably do a little bit of fairy tale reading just in case somebody's into that and they just want to hear that go on. Matt, for those of you who missed out on this whole story, that VOD will be up in the next few minutes, and I'm going to figure out how to load those over into YouTube so that we're going to start building a catalog of this. And you guys can be able to listen to anything you guys missed, and we'll put it on YouTube. Yeah, we're going to do at least one kobold tomorrow. We need to do at least one kobold tomorrow, Cookie. There'll be one NPC that I want to build. So we'll start that at 8 o'clock, and we'll get that rocking and rolling. And everything will go very well, I am sure. So let's finish up tonight. And look for someone to raid into. Again, I deeply appreciate you all being here. Hopefully you can stop by tomorrow. If you're not following, click on the follow button and click on the notifications button. Dr. Rhino is on. Does anybody have anybody else that you would suggest Dr. Rhino is a mini painter. We can go over to him. Cave Geek Art is on, but I haven't been in Cave Geeks for a long time. You're very welcome for the stream. Bull Scroll Keeper, all of you, of course. Matt. Anybody else got some suggestions, or should we raid Dr. Rhino? Dr. Rhino is here. You know what? Dr. Rhino was here the night before, so let's raid into him. Make sure, too, you're clicking on the points buttons below. We've got 14 days left to a Drunken Tales challenge that we're doing. That means I will do a summary after I've been drinking probably too much of the fairy tales that we've been reading. Let's raid over into Dr. Rhino. Dr. Rhino _ See if that worked. Yes, it did. Thank you, Chimera, for contributing the 320 towards that. Raid over, say hi from myself, say hello. If you're into painting or into Warhammer, things like that, give Dr. Rhino a follow. Remember, follows are free. I will see you all tomorrow night. Be safe, be good to each other. Love, peace, and hair grease.